Oh, please, just stay down.
When you hear the name Amazon, you'd normally associate it with Amazon.com, the vast, sprawling empire whose international success is so unprecedented, it's already projected to make its CEO, Jeff Bezos, the world's first official trillionaire. Or you may associate the brand of Amazon with its new batch of in-person stores that are now cropping up like Blockbuster did during the late 1990s. Or when you think of Amazon, you might think of their Amazon Prime video service. Whatever you think of first when you first see the Amazon logo or hear its name invoked, I'm willing to bet that it's not video game related, and there's a reason for that. Yet over the last few years, Amazon has been making some pretty bold moves towards gaining some ground in one of the few markets they had not yet managed to exploit, the video game market. Amazon's acquisition of Twitch back in 2014 was merely the company getting their foot in the door. Amazon's modus operandi of infiltration followed by assimilation led it to the natural next evolutionary step, going from hosting gaming live streams to actually making games of their own. Instead of following the now almost habitual industry trend of using Unreal Engine 4 to develop their games, Amazon seemingly out of the blue announced the creation of Lumberyard, Amazon's own game development engine, and subsequently released it to the public. While Lumberyard and the development history behind it is interesting enough to warrant its own video, what Amazon announced alongside it was a trifecta of new titles: New World, Crucible, and Breakaway. Since then, Breakaway, Amazon's 4v4 multiplayer hero shooter / MOBA hybrid, was cancelled. And from what I've seen of the gameplay, I can only assume the game being cancelled was done as a public service, a preemptive apology for its mere existence in the first place. For those of you that would have loved Amazon to go ahead and release a third-person shooter MOBA hybrid, fear not, Amazon took that concept and ham-fistedly shoved it into Crucible, late into development, and reworked the game to take the place of Breakaway. You could say that in doing so, Amazon had Crucible break away from its core foundation. Okay, come on, I had to go for it, it was an opening. I can't let that joke pass me by. So now that we've dispensed with the preliminary information, what is Crucible? Crucible, as I implied a minute ago when discussing Breakaway, is a third-person shooter MOBA hybrid. The game is split into a trifecta of modes: Harvest of the Hives, Alpha Hunters, and Harvester Command. Before I start breaking down each of these modes and critiquing them, I have to wonder, when you look at the menu of game modes, you see only Harvest of Hives, Alpha Hunters, and Arcade. When you click on Arcade, you're then brought to a separate game mode menu, which only features one single game mode: Harvester Command. I'm not sure why the menu is laid out this way. Hiding Harvester Command in this way will only unnecessarily lengthen existing queue times, because not everyone is going to take the time to open the bland-looking arcade menu icon. Not everyone's going to assume it's hiding another prominent game mode. Arcade is where you put your throwaway game modes. At least that's how I and many other people have come to associate that kind of thing in other games like Overwatch. Why the developers didn't just get rid of the arcade icon and put Harvester Command on the main menu, I'm not sure, but I don't think it was a good idea to do it the way they did. I can only assume they, like games such as Overwatch, coincidentally, intend to use the arcade in the future to feature multiple additional secondary game modes that wouldn't be considered prominent enough to be featured alongside the main two. It's not a bad idea to diversify your game with different maps and modes. However, you shouldn't be putting the cart ahead of the horse and creating said arcade menu until you've actually created some meaningful content to put into the game. Now getting back to the game modes themselves, Harvest of the Hives and Harvester Command. They share quite a bit in common, with both effectively being variants on the traditional capture point game mode design formula, differentiating from how other games handle the mode by infusing it with lots of PvE and MOBA moments. I'll start with the simplest one first. Alpha Hunters is a battle royale type mode, where 16 players drop into the arena, all in 8 teams of 2, and may the best team or individual player win. This concept of taking the popular battle royale count and just shrinking everything down in scale is hardly a new idea, and is a concept several mainstream games have been capitalizing on lately. But where Alpha Hunter stands out is that in the case where one of the players in the two-man team dies and quits the game, the remaining player can then decide to partner up with any other lone hunter in the match, and if the two of them win the match, it still counts as a team win. However, as I understand it, if a third additional lone hunter is the only remaining competition, the team alliance between you and your temporary partner is abandoned. It's an interesting gimmick, but personally I've never been overly interested in the whole battle royale genre, though I did used to dabble a bit in Fortnite back when they had the old map, not the new one. So if you're into third-person battle royale modes, this seems passable enough, but with the fairly slow time to kill, and the developer's insistence on keeping most of the MOBA mechanics in place, it doesn't really feel much like a true battle royale, where skill and luck are rewarded. In this, like a MOBA, the only thing you're rewarded for is capturing points of interest and killing AI minions. The developers might call this a battle royale mode, and other players might too, I suppose. By the barest, most generous definition, it still counts as one, but it definitely doesn't feel like one. Also, I have to go back to a previous point because this just occurred to me while recording, but the idea of teaming two hunters together and then forcing them to abandon their alliance in a decision made by the game maker sounds very familiar. I mean, isn't that basically from The Hunger Games Part 1? They basically just ripped the whole concept, the moment where Katniss and Peeta are forced to abandon their alliance because the game makers say, oh great, we're going to revoke our, two-man team win policy, and now it's only one man survives. And then the two of them ended up eating the berries and said, fuck you. And then the game makers panicked and let them both live anyway. That whole decision by the game makers was just as pointless as I feel this gameplay mechanic is. Anyway, that was kind of a side tangent because I love to rant about Hunger Games. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad. But getting back onto point, swapping over to Harvest of the Hives, this is the one that is easily the trickiest to explain and is probably one of the most unnecessarily confusing game modes in mainstream gaming. At least since Valve released the infamous Manpower game mode for Team Fortress 2 back in December 2014. I still can't get over how much of a mess that was. But hey, it did introduce grappling hooks to TF2, so it's not all bad. The match starts, as any other Crucible mode starts, with the player picking which character perks to apply to their character, and also picking their spawn point. There are a number of spawn points spread out across the edges of the circular map, making it fairly easy for players in most cases to reach the objective or important points of interest from any starting position without spending an excessive amount of time getting there. Harvest of the Hives is basically a control point and capture the flag hybrid, wherein players wait for central objectives known as hives to spawn in, the first one spawning in roughly 2 minutes after the start of the match, and subsequent hives following a similar, albeit slightly longer, trajectory. A hive match can last between 20 and 30 minutes in total, with most of my matches tending to last about 25 minutes, making them fairly long in comparison to what would normally be expected from a shooter game, but about on par for a casual MOBA match. That said, I did have some hilariously one-sided games that ended in less than 15 minutes, but as with any game mode that ends when one team reaches a score limit, ending early is always a possibility. When a hive spawns in, teams have to first eliminate the hostile plant boss that fires off slow-moving but lock-on missiles that look like flying ghostly skulls. Yeah, try to let that image sink in, because it makes no sense, but it's fun and go with it. I just have to interrupt myself and say it does bother me that this game attempts to pull off this semi-realistic art style, but also tries to go full-on Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare level of plant ridiculousness. If you're going to be cartoony, embrace it, go all in, please do, but if you're going to pull off this semi-realistic, almost esports-like tone, maybe consider dropping the whole evil, murderous plant boss that fires heat-seeking burning skull missiles concept. At any rate, once one team manages to eliminate the BS boss, the boss disappears and a secondary floating stationary object appears, this being the hive heart. Going over to it and holding down F or whatever key you have it bound to will begin the capturing process. Capturing the heart takes about 5 seconds, during which the enemy team can attempt to kill whoever's capturing it, which, if the person does die, or decides to end the sequence of their own will completely undo the capture process and potentially allow enemy players to begin capturing it instead, thus effectively transforming the gameplay from that of capture the flag to something more resembling King of the Hill. This mode is at its best when you have two teams of truly equal skill levels. And while this could be said of pretty much any PvP game mode in any game, it's doubly true here. There's a lot of intensity when your team eliminates the boss, but then the enemy appears out of nowhere, having hung back and let your team lose some health fighting the monster, and then bearing down on you to take advantage of your weakened state. This mode, like competitive Overwatch, really shines when team cooperation is at the forefront. Whichever team manages to get a third hive heart first wins. Harvester Command is another variant of Capture Point, except this one is more akin to domination. Teams fight to maintain majority control over a number of control point objectives. These control points provide essence, aka points. Essence can also be collected from eliminating hostile NPC creatures in the world. Once one team hits the point limit, the game ends. As has probably become apparent to anyone hearing this, there is no time limit, no forced consistency, so Crucible definitely isn't the type of game you should be considering jumping into on your laptop during a work break, or in any other instance where time might be an issue for you. Just an important FYI. One of the main problems with Crucible, and isn't one I think most people have been talking about, or at least not as prominently as they should, is that the game doesn't really differentiate between modes. It all feels very samey. And if you like the gameplay flow of Crucible, that's fine. But for those finding themselves a bit burnt out by the consistent repetitive grind, the game lacks any alternate means of play. This was a fairly common criticism of Overwatch during the early days, back when the game merely had quick play, competitive, and the third option to play with bots. There was no mechanism at the time to allow players to unwind and experience the game in a different light, which is why Blizzard would go on to create the Overwatch Arcade, a menu featuring about half a dozen different varying modes, all of which changed up the normal gameplay experience in a very significant way. Each of the modes presented as part of a weekly rotation, pulled from a larger pool of over a dozen total arcade modes, not including seasonal arcade modes. It provided for many players that much needed sense of variety. Amazon decided to sacrifice gameplay variety for the sake of gameplay consistency. Now, it's possible, and I would be more than inclined to believe, in fact probable, that the arcade will eventually feature more than just a single mode, because, well, it wouldn't make sense for them to have created an arcade menu and called it the arcade if it was only going to be one game. But Amazon, unlike most studios, had the time, money, resources, and most of all the incentive to have said arcade filled with easily 4 or 5 secondary modes on day one. Crucible is supposed to be their opening act, their premiere as a credible game developer and publisher, and at the end of the day, I'm not overly impressed. Crucible in many ways reminds me of another Unreal Engine 4 powered game, one ironically enough made by Epic Games themselves, the creators of Unreal Engine, a game by the name of Paragon. Now, if you don't remember Paragon, I don't fault you. Paragon was a very unique game, in that it strongly infused third-person shooter and MOBA gameplay elements into one, except unlike Crucible, which prioritized the MOBA elements over the rest, Paragon tried to lean more in the third-person shooter direction. Also, Paragon distinguishes itself from Crucible in one other regard, that it was actually consistently a pretty fun game. Playing a MOBA from the perspective of a third-person shooter, attacking different lanes, eliminating useless enemy AI minions and mini-bosses to level up, so you become powerful enough to tear down the walls of the enemy base and invade their land and become an agent of destruction. I'm down with that. That sounds awesome. In fact, it was awesome while the game was up, but no one played it, so that did suck. Crucible, comparatively, just doesn't have a lot of these rewarding, awe-inspiring moments. A lot of the PvP conflicts mostly just involve players dealing poke damage to each other from range until the objective spawns in, and then all hell breaks loose for a few minutes until one team captures, and then the game reverts back to the occasional poke damage encounters. Another game Crucible has been compared to in some aspects is Evolve, and while there certainly can be a handful of parallel similarities, this I can only attribute to some more mainstream players not really understanding how a MOBA works on a mechanical level. I'm by no means a MOBA expert. I would be hesitant to even refer to myself as a novice, but I am familiar enough with MOBAs to recognize the invalid nature of this claim. As I've already referenced in relation to Paragon, Evolve had the same gameplay loop of eliminating simple AI creatures to gain XP to level up, until you reach a powerful enough level that the game really becomes interesting. What people forget, though, is that Evolve itself stole this from MOBAs. Evolve effectively was a MOBA, except it handled the MOBA elements better than Crucible ever really does, to be honest. What Evolve did right, and what Crucible did wrong, was Evolve actually awarded players the opportunity to unlock or significantly upgrade character abilities that would dynamically change the nature of the gameplay. As an Evolve monster, do you want all 4 monster abilities unlocked, which all deal basic damage but allow you to swap between them at will? You can do that. Do you want to only unlock and fully upgrade 2 abilities, which will then basically shred any player within range? You can do that. Evolve lets you play the game the way you want to, putting the power in the hands of the player to decide how they want to play. With Crucible, you really don't control any of it. Instead, you get nonsense like plus 20% weapon reload speed, plus 10% additional damage when firing the final bullet in a clip, plus 8% movement speed when sprinting, plus 10% faster ability cooldown time. You see where I'm going here. These upgrades are by no means useless, but they are boring to discuss and just as boring to play. They can indeed prove quite useful in certain instances, but again, they're the most boring and uninnovative upgrades I've ever seen in just about any comparable game. These upgrades give you no reason or incentive to adapt a different playstyle or give you any sense of empowerment when unlocking them. It's worth noting that Crucible is a hero shooter game, and it does feature a decent number of selectable heroes. Each hero has its own very different playstyle. This is not like Overwatch, where at this point, it feels like there are multiple heroes capable of fulfilling the exact same role. Crucible, comparatively, is more in line with Team Fortress 2, with each character having their own unique personality, their own unique weapon and role, and a fairly vast number of in-game voice lines. However, unlike MOBAs and hero shooters, there is no support or healer type character present in Crucible. I believe 2 of the characters in the game do have healing abilities, one being a self-heal ability, the other being an AoE or area of effect healing ability available on cooldown, but neither of these characters' loadout kits are designed primarily around being a healer. Instead, players heal by picking up health packs around the map, which can be stored for future use. It does seem a bit odd that, for all its reliance on MOBA mechanics, Crucible omits one of the most prominent team roles in any MOBA, which largely separates MOBA team fights compared to team fights seen in FPS games like Counter-Strike, that role being the support or healer. Personally, I'm indifferent to the omission of the role, but I do have to note that time spent looking for health kits, as they're scattered around the map in inconvenient locations for the most part, away from the main fighting areas, is a giant time-wasting activity in a game that's all about maximizing time spent on the objective, and farming for XP by eliminating NPCs. It's also worth noting that Crucible does not support any kind of player communication at this time. No voice chat, no text chat, and only a very bare bones and honestly useless emote system. The only communications tool available at present that remotely serves any functional purpose is the in-game callouts. Players can hit a button to place a marker at what they're looking at, and depending on what it is, a group of NPCs, a enemy player, or the objective, that character will then shout aloud the appropriate response, and a indicator will appear in the kill feed, alerting the rest of the team to who called out and what they were calling out for. As useful as this is, it's a poor substitute for an actual voice or text chat. The Crucible developers have confirmed both voice chat and text chat are on the way, but I do have to wonder why they ever thought it was appropriate to release this game, a game so centered around team play, without having voice and text chat implemented. Now that I've addressed the game modes, hero selection, and the inexplicable lack of voice and text chat, etc., I do want to spend a minute talking about the game's monetization, because there are a couple things worth pointing out here too. Crucible has 2 primary forms of monetization. Firstly, while the game is free to play, it does feature multiple premium editions on Steam, starting with the Tracker Founders Pack, priced at $14.99 USD, which includes a single character skin, 500 in-game credits, basically enough to buy one other single cosmetic of your choice, as well as the Seasonal Battle Pass, accompanied by a premium boost that lets you instantly skip the first 10 levels of the Battle Pass, and instead start off at level 11. Then there's the Predator Founders Pack, priced at $24.99, which sadly does not include a movie tie-in skin of the Predator itself, because that would honestly be cool, but instead comes with 1,000 in-game credits, a legendary loot box, and an even more upgraded battle pass that'll let you start at level 21. Finally, there's the Alpha Hunters Founders Pack, priced at $49.99, which will grant you 6,000 in-game credits, a second exclusive cosmetic skin, and will preload your battle pass to start at level 41. I'm all for allowing free-to-play games to monetize however they want, as long as it doesn't hinder my ability to enjoy the game and doesn't give players any kind of direct gameplay advantage, and as long as I don't have to see any advertisements in the game. But there's something really messed up when you as a developer try to explicitly incentivize players to spend money to not play your game. That doesn't exactly sound to me like a strong endorsement of the quality of your product. But I suppose it is somewhat less egregious than trying to set up a gambling economy based around loot boxes. Whatever else you may say about Crucible, at least it doesn't have loot boxes, so I guess that's something to be grateful for. At the end of the day, is Crucible worth playing? Is it something I would personally recommend? Yes and no. Crucible seems to, at its core, be fighting a crisis of confidence. It doesn't seem to really know what it wants to be. It's had a long and troubled development cycle, and it shows. But that said, it can still be a lot of fun at times. If you're into casual MOBAs, it's a solid entry. If you're a tactical third-person shooter fan, it's passable. If you're any other kind of gamer, odds are you'll play it for a couple days and never play it again. The future for Crucible is murky at best, with the game currently getting mixed reviews on Steam, and no future roadmap having yet been released to the public. But who knows? There have been plenty of games that have started out in fairly poor estates before then eventually making one hell of a turnaround, but those are long odds. So buyer beware, or player beware as the case may be. I hate to say this phrase again, but it's also worth noting that I haven't gone into full detail on every single aspect of the game, as to do so would require this video to extend more than double its current runtime. And since I have no desire to script, record, and edit a 40-minute long review video, I'll leave it at this. If you do want more detailed hero ability breakdowns and descriptions of the differences between each hero, there are plenty of videos out there on these topics. I just wanted to chime in and share my 2 cents of input on the game itself at large. If you had any questions regarding certain topics I discussed in this video, I am very active in the comments, so if you ever want to shoot me a message down below in the comments, I will definitely answer it. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it very much if you gave it a like, and again, comment below what you think of this game or this review. Commenting helps almost as much, if not more so, than leaving a like. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified of future uploads. I upload new review and game discussion videos at least once every other week, so look forward to more content coming soon. Odds are that I'll already have my next video out sooner than that, because I've got 1 or 2 videos already scripted and in process right now. There have been several high-profile games I do want to cover. This summer just keeps on giving, and I'll keep covering. Thank you all for watching and supporting my content. It's honestly greatly appreciated, and I appreciate all the support I've been getting on YouTube lately. And I'll see you all next time. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody, and peace out.